What's going on, people? My name is Batman, and I want to preface everything that I'm about to say by first making it very clear that I have had a lot of fun on Destiny and I intend to play a lot more of it. However, that being said, in a lot of ways, this game came up egregiously short, and what's incredibly frustrating and ironic is that the things that I feel Bungie did poorly in this game are the exact same things I always thought they did so well, so masterfully in fact, in Halo. What Destiny kind of reminds me of is the first Assassin's Creed. When that game first came out, every major reviewing publication agreed that it was a great game with great core gaming mechanics that were new, but they also agreed that it had some notable problems holding it back. Now, Assassin's Creed listened to those criticisms, fixed them, and obviously went on to become a very successful franchise. And right now is the best time to voice your criticisms for Destiny, because look, the contract is signed. There are 2 more installments of this game on the way, and I guarantee you that the Bungie developers are already thinking about what they may want to do differently in the next game. You know, I know the expansion packs haven't come out, and they probably haven't begun work on the next Destiny. They probably haven't even openly discussed it amongst themselves officially yet, but I guarantee you in their heads they are already thinking about the possibilities and the things they would like to do differently for Destiny 2. And so with this video, I'm hoping to raise some general awareness about where Bungie went wrong with Destiny, and then we can start a massive movement of 10 million badass motherfuckers complaining about video games, and maybe Bungie will hear a thing or two about it, and then fix what's wrong with Destiny. It should be pretty easy considering they've done all these things correctly and much better in the past with Halo. And it's also, I think, pertinent to compare Destiny with Halo because this game really is sort of a spiritual successor to the Halo franchise. And not just because this is the game Bungie worked on after Halo or because of the very similar game mechanics and physics, but also because there are many common story themes between the two. For instance, when you first talk to the speaker about the Traveler, he tells you, and I quote, "This is how we found the Traveler after it had made its final stand. Humanity and the Traveler did not make a final stand. The Traveler made its final stand, and we found it after the fact, so presumably we weren't there for its final stand." Now, why wouldn't humanity be there for the final stand? Probably because its last stand was some sort of area of effect attack, and it would have shit on us the same way it shit on the darkness. I mean, final stand is a pretty powerful death streak after all. So, I imagine we were in some safe place while the Traveler self-destructed and pushed the darkness back, and that sounds exactly like the Forerunners putting us in shield worlds while they activated the Halo rings, which were galaxy-wide area of effect attacks that pushed back the Flood. The Traveler is an ancient alien-style god that loves us, so were the Forerunners who had our back, and wouldn't you know it, the Traveler itself looks exactly like a Forerunner structure from Halo. You could put that big old ball in Halo and it would fit in seamlessly, especially because the 2 games have very similar art styles in general to boot. If you put Cortana into that little 343 Guilty Spark blue floating ball, it would be one of the little ghosts now in Destiny, and you'll recall this is exactly how people feel about Halo when compared to Marathon, which was what Bungie worked on before Halo. And I would even go so far as to say that sometimes it seems like Bungie used the last 2 games they made of Halo, ODST and Reach, to test things out for Destiny. Now, we know they were working on Destiny at the time. You may have seen this Easter egg in ODST of a poster with a picture of Earth and the Traveler, and it says Destiny Awaits. That was the first Destiny Easter egg. That was back in ODST. Now, in ODST, they tried out an open world campaign for the first time, right? Where instead of choosing levels from a list on the menu, you would walk to their starting points in the open world. And then in Reach, they started testing out the sprint ability for the first time, and of course, custom class loadouts with special powers. The jetpack mechanic and physics they introduced in Reach is identical to the glide physics they now have in Destiny. I think armor lock might have been the original idea for the Titan Super because the Titan is a tank, right? But they probably realized armor lock was breaking too many controllers, so they just gave the Titan a bubble shield instead, which was also first tested out in Reach as an armor ability as opposed to an equipment pickup. And one other thing that might be a little bit of a stretch on my part, but hear me out here. In Reach, you have that one random space battle mission where they built this entire space flight combat mechanic just for this one brief, like 10-minute space mission in Reach where you're fighting your way towards the space station thing. And the spaceship you use in that mission looks almost identical to the Valkyrie model ship you can now get in Destiny. I think they might have been toying around with the idea of including some space combat in Destiny, but scrapped it along the way, probably because they concluded they couldn't fit it into the game either due to the constraints of the old gen, the constraints of the disc, or just the constraints of time and resources. But ultimately, I think that is the systemic underlying cause of most of this game's flaws. They just couldn't fit it in. Now, when you compare Destiny to Halo, I think the first glaring regression on Bungie's part is the story itself, which is of course the most surprising metamorphosis, because the Halo storyline was probably the greatest story an FPS game has ever had to date. And of course, a big part of what made Halo's story so fun was all the backstory, the behind the scenes in the books and such that wasn't obvious just playing through the campaign, and they really went all out with the backstory this time as well. But the problem with Destiny is that if you don't read up on all the backstory, if you're not going through all the Grimoire cards and reading threads on Reddit and checking the Destiny wiki, you're not going to have any idea what the fuck is going on. And that's a problem, because I can't even access the Grimoire cards. It doesn't let me do it on the computer, I'm assuming because they really want me to get their app, but I don't have a platform to get the app on. I have a shitty BlackBerry knockoff phone that you can get at Walmart for like $20. I don't have an iPhone or an iPad or any of that shit, and so I can't read the Grimoire cards, and it feels like I'm blocked off from the majority of the story now. And just playing through the campaign itself does not provide a very coherent and consistent narrative as to why you're killing the enemies you're killing or going the places you're going. The problem is that they try to fit essentially their entire storyline into these brief, periods of time, either right before the mission starts, when you're in that loading screen where your ship is going at blue light speed, where you're usually your ghost or some other random person whose voice you may or may not recognize, gives you some basic information about what's going on. God forbid anyone in your fire team talks during that time, or you'll completely miss what's being said. Or they have the ghost fill you in on some other details right after you kill the level's boss and you're going around picking up whatever loot is left before the mission ends. It's these brief periods at the beginning, at the very end of the level, where for 30 seconds your ghost just kind of fills you in on what's going down, and that's, they tried to fit their entire storyline into these brief moments, and, 2 or 3 cutscenes that also seemed senseless. These little pieces of monologue, they never last more than a minute. They do not serve as a proper catalyst for fleshing out the entire story, and even the people I've played with who were well read up on the backstory and had been following all the lore information before the game's release, and that includes myself, we still had no idea what was going on or what had even happened when we finally finished the campaign. Now, Halo had a lot of backstory too, like a dozen novels worth of backstory, but just playing through the campaign of that game itself could provide anyone, even a casual observer, a coherent narrative of what was going on and specifically why they were going to the places they were going and killing the people they were killing. For instance, the beginning of Halo 2 had a shitload of backstory to it, all about how the Covenant didn't even realize Earth was our home at first. They were just looking for Forerunner artifacts, and it turns out humans are Forerunner artifacts, as is Earth itself, and of course that's why they attacked Reach too, because Reach had a bunch of Forerunner artifacts on it, because humans and the Forerunners are connected. And originally they had a much bigger fleet prepared to come fuck shit up on Earth, but the Master Chief and a couple of other human badass motherfuckers managed to blow that entire fleet up. And of course there's the story about how Johnson survived and how the Arbiter was the commander of the fleet that you were fighting in Halo 1 and all that good stuff that was a lot of fun to read about. But you did have to read the books to know all about that. However, the campaign itself still provided a coherent narrative to somebody who didn't have all that backstory. Aliens are attacking Earth and you have to defend it. The Arbiter's being sent to squash a rebel faction of the Covenant, so on and so forth. Basic narrative explanations, and if you wish you can dig deeper and find out all the juicy backstory, and that's kind of what made the backstory so fun, is you would learn new things about stuff in the campaign that you thought you already understood, and it would kind of blow your fucking mind. Now, they were able to tell this story in the campaign through the very traditional method of cutscenes. Well-written, well-executed cutscenes, and that's the catalyst they use to tell their story, and it's a catalyst that Destiny doesn't have. There are not very many cutscenes in Destiny, and those few that are there do not clarify a goddamn thing. I still don't understand who that one girl was that kept stalking me. I don't know what she wants in life. I don't know why the Awoken were acting like jerks. I thought we were on the same team. I don't really understand what the Black Garden was or what its purpose was. I don't see how you could even get a vague answer to these questions via the campaign. Everything just happens so fast with so little explanation. Now, the campaign gameplay itself is also missing some of what made the Halo campaign so special. It's not that it's linear. I know that's one of the primary criticisms it's received, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. unfair when that GameSpot review gives it a 6 out of 10 and cites it being too linear, because every modern campaign and or story mode on the market right now, excluding Skyrim, is pretty linear. They gave Ghost an 8 out of 10 as if that campaign was something more than a pathetic 2 hours of easy mode, even on the hardest difficulty, whack-a-mole with 0 replay value. Now granted, maybe a game like Borderlands wasn't linear in the sense that you could choose when to do side quests and such, but the downside to that was that you inevitably ended up out-leveling half of the content. Either you did all the side quests and out-leveled the story missions, or you did the story missions and out-leveled the side quests, or if you just ran around in the open world killing stuff, you could potentially out-level both. And non-linear cakewalks aren't necessarily superior to a linear yet difficult challenge. So I don't mind that it's linear, just like I didn't mind that the Halo campaigns were linear. My problem with Destiny is that unlike Halo, it doesn't have enough gameplay variety to allow for significant levels of replayability, which is a problem because at the end of the day, a huge part of this game comes down to replaying strikes and heroic story missions and bounties for story missions and all kinds of other PvE replay playthroughs. And if you look back at Halo 1, my favorite mission in that game was the control room, and this is the 5th mission in the game. This mission, like most Halo missions, had a ton of gameplay diversity that allowed for replayability. When you start that mission out, the first sequence involves moving through this Forerunner building filled with sleeping grunts and patrolling elites. It's a stealth sequence. You go around bashing the sleeping grunts' heads in, and the hard part is sneaking past the elites or sneaking up to the elites and smashing them in the back before they know you're there. If any shots are fired or anyone sees you, all the bad guys wake up. It's very hard to get through the entire sequence without waking at least some aliens up. Then after that, you get out of the building, you get a warthog, and you fight your way through a canyon, and then you get a tank. But you don't have to use the tank. You could just stick with the warthog and have a guy in the passenger seat with the rocket launcher if you felt more comfortable using speed to dodge attacks instead of the tank to simply absorb and survive them. Then, once that's over, you go through a typical infantry shoot-'em-up sequence, and then you come out on this bridge, and if you're a badass, you can hijack a parked Banshee before the elites get to it, and then you can fuck shit up from the air in your Banshee, and then when you land at the final destination, you have a boss fight with a Golden Elite. In this one level, there was a bunch of different sequences. You had a stealth sequence, you had your vehicle sequence, you had your infantry sequence, you could grab a sniper rifle from one of your allies and snipe, you could grab rocket launchers and rocket your way through it. You could steal the Banshee, you could not steal the Banshee. And it's not that these sequences necessarily mean that, no 2 playthroughs of that level are going to be alike. It's not, the equivalent of a Skyrim playthrough. But it retains potential for new stuff to happen the next time you play the level, and that was true for almost every level in Halo. Other good examples are Delta Halo from Halo 2, or remember at the end of Halo 3 when you have to fight those 2 big-ass scarabs, you can fight them from the air in a Falcon, or on a Mongoose, or with a Warthog, or even with a Ghost, or you could just fire rockets from the hills up above, and there were a bunch of different ways to go about that fight and many differing opinions on what the best method for victory was. Destiny does not have this. In Destiny, excluding that one strike on Mars where you get to use interceptors against that giant battle tank, every strike and story mission boils down to infantry-based combat, blasting your way from point A to point B, and sometimes in between you have to hold off against a couple waves of enemies while your Ghost tries to unlock some door, but that's as far as variation in combat sequences goes. And that particular sequence I think they way overused in this game, not to mention it's been overused in every game since its original conception in the library of Halo 1. But for instance, in level 3 of Halo Combat Evolved, at a certain point you have to escort Captain Keyes to safety, right? You have like this live mobile entity you have to protect. Or you have those end of the game sequences in Halo 1 and 3 where you have to escape a massive explosion in your Warthog. Things like that kind of add some variety to the gameplay and give every level its own distinct flavor to it. Destiny did not have this. In Destiny, it felt like a lot of the story missions blended together. Like, back in Halo, I could very clearly describe to you and remember each specific level and what order they were in. I could not do that in Destiny. I could tell you what order the planets that you go to are in, but I couldn't tell you what order the missions are in because they all blur together. And there's a lot of, going through the same areas. And that's even true for like doing the patrols. You end up just going through the same area and the same sequences of enemies that you did in the story mission. So it becomes sort of redundant. And again, a big part of this game at the end of the end game content is replaying the PvE, and it just feels like there isn't enough replay value in the PvE, but they had that replay value in Halo Combat Evolved, mainly with the wide variety of different weapons and vehicles that you had access to. Now granted, there is some variety, you can choose a different class, or you can use a different gun on the class you're using, but the differences there are kind of minor. I would compare it to, like, you know, the differences between the fuel rod and the rocket launcher from Halo. Like, they're different rocket launchers, but at the end of the day, they both go boom. You know what I mean? Now, lastly, the multiplayer. Destiny's multiplayer is a lot of fun, and it's definitely superior to most other recent games multiplayer I can think of. Certainly better than Ghosts, and another reason why I don't think that GameSpot review is fair is because half the games that come out today, it's a multiplayer game with a campaign that's just there to say they have a campaign. And Destiny's multiplayer holds up to other games multiplayer, without a doubt, and I don't think even the reviewers disagree with that. And then its campaign is probably better than most other FPS campaigns out there. I think the real problem is that this game got overhyped. And because it got overhyped, it didn't live up to a lot of people's super high expectations. But when objectively compared to Ghosts and Titanfall, is it really several points worth of review score underneath those games? I think not. But regardless, Destiny multiplayer has two primary drawbacks when compared to the original online multiplayer masterpiece that was Halo. The first and perhaps somewhat more subjective point I would argue is that it doesn't have enough vehicles, and the two vehicles it does have so little armor that you're basically putting yourself at a disadvantage by getting into them. Vehicles were a big part of what made Halo MP interesting, and it wasn't just because of air combat and tank battles and all the different scenarios and heart-pounding moments of gameplay where you're boarding a tank and getting shot at by banshees and shit. It was also about the teamwork. The Warthog is like the original visual embodiment of online cooperation, working together to become more powerful as a unit, and the fucking thrill of transporting a teammate with the enemy flag back to home base and you're being chased by all kinds of shit, and right before you get back you take a banshee blast to the rear and the Warthog flips and you all get pushed out and are badly wounded, and Tommy and Waffles are like, "Go Bats, we will hold them!" And I sprint back to score the flag and they spam grenades and try to buy me some time, and it works and we're pumped. And this of course leads me to my other primary criticism of Destiny multiplayer, which is that there aren't enough game modes. And of the 5 game modes they do have, 4 of them are deathmatch variants. You have 3v3 deathmatch, 6v6 deathmatch, free-for-all deathmatch, and then 6v6 deathmatch where you get more points per kill for holding the flags. You know, I get that deathmatch is always the most popular game mode, but when you add up everyone that's in all the objective playlists in any game, they way outnumber the deathmatch playlist. And just like in Titanfall, those of us who prefer objective-based gameplay only get like 1 game mode. My options in Destiny are 3v3 King of the Hill sometimes when salvage is available, or deathmatch. Capture the Flag would be fucking dope in this game, as would Oddball and Where's Big Team Battle. What was always extra fun about Halo was the silly game modes like Team Sprockets or on Reach. Did you ever play multi-team King of the Hill when it was still 6 teams of 2? That shit was ridiculous. Remember Rocket Hog Race and Team Snipers and Team Swords and motherfucking Griffball? Halo was the pinnacle of gameplay variety and diversity and replayability, and Destiny could very easily be that too. I mean, they're set up for it perfectly. The core of the game is wonderful. All they gotta do is some of the same shit they've already done so well in the past. It's like Happy Gilmore when the ball's just sitting outside the hole and Morgan Freeman is just like, tap it in, Happy. You just gotta tap it in. Tap, tap, tap-a-roo. Well, all I'm saying is tap it in, Bungie. You tap that Halo ass. Please rate if you support the cause. This is Batman signing out.